Now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representatives Carol Spackman-Moss and Mike Winder. Great to have both of you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with term limits. Going to be an interesting conversation moving forward because the United Utah Party announcing it is going to file a ballot initiative. Let's start with you, Carol. You've been well beyond in office what this term limit would be. Your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm opposed to it. It takes power away from the people. When they like a representative, they like their legislator, they want to keep them there, they're automatically off the ballot after a certain amount of time. That takes away their choice. They should be able to choose the people they want. So you lose effective legislators that their constituents are happy with.
Mike, you have kind of an interesting take on it, that you side with Carol on the local side, but nationally maybe you think it's worth looking into.
Well, locally, it seems what we're doing seems to work. Utah is a well-managed state, and other legislatures that have passed term limits, it backfires. We saw that in Arizona. Nationally, Congress is so broken.
Dig into that a little more before you move on.
Okay, the state of Arizona passed term limits, and they actually found that retirements dropped 10% that year because everyone said, well, I'll hold off till it's an open seat, and they kind of gave them that full 12 years to finish. So term limits actually tend to backfire on the local level. The national level, I think a lot of us agree Congress is so broken, we got to try something different when they're spending a third of their day on fundraising calls for that next re-election.
Your thought on how it might impact women also?
Women are impacted, and they found rather than increasing the number, it decreases. For one thing, women, there isn't as big a bench, if you will, for women. They're starting to be, but when a woman leaves, if they're term limited, a man usually replaces them. And so the studies have shown there are actually fewer women, and that was thought to be the opposite. But there's so many academic studies that show how it not only negatively affects women, but how it doesn't improve governing.
The argument on the opposite side, obviously, though, is we don't want career politicians. We have some people in the state legislature, it's very limited, that have been in a very long time. You obviously are one of those. Address that argument.
You know, there's not a lot of people who, for what, $12,000 are willing to spend 7 weeks a year away from their day job and interim meetings and everything else besides. And so we already have a very high turnover anyway in Utah. You do have some good ones like Senator Lyle Hilliard and Representative Carol Spackman-Moss that have been there a while, but we value that institutional knowledge. It's my second term, and I'm already a committee chair. That shows the turnover we already have in the House of Reps.
Yeah, it was a big turnover just this last election.
Right.
Here
Well,
locally.
let me just add to that career part. It isn't a career for me. It isn't for anybody, because I had a 33-year career as a teacher. Those who are not retired are leaving their jobs and often at a significant loss to their income.
It is.
So it's hardly a career because it's a part-time position.
It is public service, it is a sacrifice, and we see that natural turnover in Utah as it is.
Okay, I do want to mention that I'm going to have a representative from the United Utah Party on the show in a couple of weeks to share their insight on why they would like to go forward.
They're grasping for relevancy, and this is a ploy for them to try to be in the news and stay relevant. So we'll
I
see
will
how it
ask
plays
them
out.
to respond to that very comment right there.
And added to that is Richard Davis is an academic, and he surely read a lot of those studies, because there's a lot of information out there and studies that show it's not effective. It doesn't improve.
All right, let's move on to another hot topic throughout the week. That is the Mueller testimony. A couple of committees before the House. I would like to hear from both of you. What did you come away with as the most significant point from that back and forth with those two committees? Let's go ahead and start with you this time, Mike.
Well, Utahns love a good testimony meeting as much as the next guy, but I thought the Mueller testimony was especially notable for what it didn't say, which was it didn't say anything new from the report. In fact, most of his answers were, well, read the report, or just quoting from the report. And the report is no smoking gun. It's ugly in places, certainly, but for those who want to come after this president, they will continue to use it to beat him over the head.
All right, I love the reference there. I tend to fall asleep in testimony meeting, though.
Well, and a lot did during the Mueller report, too.
Okay, your thoughts?
Yes, you could fall asleep reading it because it's very dense. I've tried. The most significant thing that came out of it was the clarity from Mueller about the interference in the election from foreign governments, specifically Russians. I mean, it's very clear there was interference. He wouldn't answer the question about whether it change the outcome of the election. But that is a very serious problem, and it's something that we need to address, because our democracy is at stake here, and our elections are a sacred part of our democracy.
Yeah, let's hit on that, because even before the elections, we had even local politicians sounding the warning signal about they are messing with our elections. Are you confident that lawmakers will come together and address that effectively?
I'm not. I'm not sure that there is an easy answer out there. I think we agree that it is a threat on our democracy when foreign hostile governments try to meddle in our elections, which I think all of us should decry. But there's not an easy solution to it either, when there's so many ways to buy Facebook ads and different social media infiltrations these days.
So are we going to get to the point where people are welcoming it because it provides them with information potentially to win an election?
I think that's just an appalling thought. And right now, when they're considering that in Congress, and I'm hearing that that it won't even be taken up by Senator McConnell in the Senate, that's wrong. This isn't a partisan issue. There's a lot at stake here on elections. I mean, it can be just the opposite, in depending on who wins the election, or 4 more years after that, it could be the other side. So we have to do something now, and we have to do something significant.
Okay, any additional thoughts
Well,
on that?
I do have great faith in our local county clerks and in the elections that they run here in Utah. I think we have a well-run system here, but it's the social media ads and other things that foreign governments that can skew it.
We're not worried about them hacking our election.
In
We need to
some
be on
cases
guard,
they are.
but there's no proof that that's ever happened. So you make a point there that it's the influence outside of that.
Right.
Right.
I'm not saying we don't need to be on guard that they could, but we just haven't seen
All
that to this
those
point.
fake groups on Facebook and other social media that were done by Russian bots, they influence people,
Right.
because they followed them.
Yeah, that's a key point right there. When we see a scene play out like we saw during the week in Washington, it's the back and forth. You know pretty much how it's going to go when a Republican lawmaker's up, how it's going to go when a Democratic lawmaker is up. Do the American people win when that's happening?
Not at all. But I think they're becoming increasingly tired of it. Even when the president makes a racial slur, it's so predictable. This group goes unhinged often on him, and this group goes unhinged trying to defend him, and the media plays it up as big as they can because the ratings go up. And we see the same with something like the Mueller testimony, where both sides are trying to commandeer and get the headline out of it. And the reality is the American people are saying, hey, can you fix schools and infrastructure and come up with a common sense solution to border security and immigration and areas where the middle part of America can agree? And I think we're tired of Congress.
Well, and I think one of the most appalling things that I saw yesterday was the barely disguised contempt from Republicans toward Mueller. I mean, this is a man who is a decorated veteran who's been a lifelong Republican. Robert Mueller was appointed by Reagan first and was an FBI director, and then by Bush. And he was treated with such contempt when he was doing a job. He came out of retirement to do this job, and so they were trying to demonize him personally. And that's what's happened with a lot of our politics, is that personal demonization.
Yeah, there was a clear strategy from both sides.
Oh, absolutely.
During that time.
Well,
real quick, because I want to get on to one other thing. We have about a minute. Real fast. Your last thought on that.
Just real quick, Mueller could not explain, though, why all 25 of the leaks that came out of his camp were to harm the president, and why the majority of the staff he put on that had actually donated to Hillary Clinton. And
Okay.
So,
Okay. I want to ask you real quick. Democrats are now still saying it's time for impeachment. Ben McAdams, our lone Democrat, is saying he's not on board for that. Do you believe that's a good path to take?
I believe that is a good path, and I support him in that, because I think now we're
You support who in that?
I support the move not to impeach.
Oh, okay.
So,
just to make that clear.
Right, Speaker Pelosi, and you said Ben Adams is also. Because the election is too close now, and all the polls have shown that the majority of the Americans don't want to see an impeachment. And I think the thing we should be focusing on as Democrats is talking about what people really care about: accessible, affordable health care, inequality in many things, in income and in tax policy. There are so many important things. If you look at the 2018 election and how the won back the majority in the House, that they stayed focused on those issues, and it paid off.
All right, we're going to have to end it on that note. Great conversation. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.